All right, I hope everyone had a great break, and I think we can just jump right into our first event of the day, or our final event of the day, sorry, which is a panel hosted by Michelle Soto. This panel is going to focus on the topic of fear, the struggles that Indigenous people face, and we're going to be invited to reflect on our own experiences as individuals of the land and what can be done to shift the status quo around creating spaces and conversations where everyone feels comfortable and welcome. So I will pass the floor to Michelle whenever you're ready.
Okay. So I am going to light some smudge because it was 2.5 hours of trying to figure out how to get onto Zoom. That was stressful. And today, technology is really, really difficult. I grew up in a simple time. Okay. So the part of discussion is talking about how we have impossible standards in the reality sometimes. And when we have these discussions, and I wanted to just have like an open discussion without any kind of logistics, without any kind of stimulants or any learning material, because I wanted to get in a mind frame of just like it's going to be not easy topic, but I want to normalize it because it can be very hard and tense. So I light some smudge. I do speak a little bit of my language. I am Michelle Soto. I'm from Northern Alberta. I'm Cree and Dene. I am predominantly Woodland Cree from Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation, and I speak Cree. So Upsis Yawig, which means I speak and understand so much. Kagisimutanan magitawanan tanawino wioma sigutsun mikwa swao kehewesquel. Vitegwe nimosho mina nikokom pemoho manto. Nadas kamun kisimonto kia winska tutikia. Hi sagitin. What I did is I called I asked the creator, I said for thanks to the creator, but I also asked for our grandmothers and grandfathers who work for the creator to come in and sit with us. And those are our ancestors. Colonization is not an easy topic. It is never an easy topic. And part of the background that I come from is intergenerational trauma. And I am Indigenous, but I don't like to see when you disclose any kind of thing of background information of yourself, you being Indigenous or even a minority or even whatever sexuality, automatically the energy shifts and people automatically become very negative. And sometimes energy gets really negative and heavy because people aren't open to those discussions yet. It's very once you start to actually, how many people actually say I have friends who I have one Indigenous friend, and it's like, whoa, okay. And this is like a person like who has just one Indigenous friend, right? Or like, oh, you're so smart for being Indigenous. Oh, you're so smart for being this. And it's like, and over time, those little comments can actually be really hard on your mental health and your physical health. So I'm 43 years old and I've gone through a lot of hard times.
I literally
And
shaved. I don't know why I didn't wear shorts.
what?
My
Oh,
mom.
someone's video. I can hear someone talking, and their microphone's on. But reason why I wanted to have this discussion is because taking up space in a colonized world, and this is colonized world, throughout world history, there always have been people who have been the dominant civilization. And people literally utilized human beings to benefit their hardship and suffering to increase their wealth and their status in society. When Canada first started, it was like, just picture a long time ago. There are people who come from European countries and they wanted to go and venture out away from their country because their country was overpopulated, completely destroyed, heavily polluted, and they had a lot of sicknesses and they had very little space. So when people came here and they went all across the ocean and they were stuck on these ships and they came to Canada, and these natives found these Europeans, right? When they first saw them, it wasn't the historical picture they show, right? It was actually a lot of the people coming to Canada were very deficient in a lot of vitamins and nutrients. They were very sickly. They were very pale, and natives would be like, they saw it as like, you're suffering, let's help you. We never met anybody like you, but you're, part of this world, part of this mother nature. So they helped them. And that we all know what turned out of it, because my gugum used to tell me a long time ago, this isn't a white person thing. This isn't a native thing. This isn't a different color walk of life thing. This is a human being thing. We have innate abilities. We have this connection to Mother Earth, to our spirituality, and it gets severed when we start to have toxicity, stress, fear, materialistic wealth, wanting quick gratification. And those are the things that we have to think of. When that comes into our lives, that disharmony, like especially COVID, it was when COVID came, it was like this real dark time. And it was like sickness and grief and this energy. And people started to think we need something more in life because it was fear-based. So when colonization happens and we talk about it, we think about historically, what was the factors that started it? Historically, it is about one culture trying to dominate to make the benefit for them to rise up. And we are Indigenous people are not any better, but since the beginning of that interaction, we have been claimed as lesser beings because we chose to have a different life that wasn't as civilized as they say. So we were actually subjected into a parented structure where we were seen as lesser human beings and they knew better for us. And that created a system where we are constantly parented, monitored, utilized, seen as, oh, but you can do this because you're a strong person. And then there's the term of white fragility, where white fragility is where they are actually protected as a society because society actually was set up for them to grow and foster. And I'm not against any of people walks of life. I just like to say the European descendants, it's because they were doing what they thought was best. And now as an Indigenous person and a minority, it's like taking up those spaces and collectively talking about the topic of fear, because colonization in the pandemic helped design a world with little to no trust. And we can't keep doing that because fear is really hard on the body. When you're stuck on oh my God, when we're in the pandemic and we were sitting there and you try to go out somewhere, remember the fear that really resided in you when you go anywhere, and it became normal. And it was like that fear actually jacks up your body full of cortisone. So your height is like, it's called hypervigilant mode, and you're stuck on fight or flight mode. The body cannot sustain that ability for a long time, which is why you see a higher levels of health conditions in Indigenous populations or people who are minorities or suppressed populations, and the high risk of high complications, the social conditions. So when you jack up the body, your body can only sustain it for so long, and then it shoots down and you have a higher complications and you have health problems the older you age. But it is not something that you have to be stuck with. Like, you're not stuck. It's your body and your mind that you have to get out of it. So your body stores in trauma and fear. So that's why it's good to shake when if this is heavy, just shake it off or tap it down, because the weight will come onto your body, mostly on your shoulders and your neck, and then on top of your head. And there's a spot right here. It will go there, and your shoulders and your hips and your knees. So wherever you start to feel that tension, and it's better when you're younger to start to recognize these features in your body, because your body is the one frame that you have a relationship with. And it's like, dealing with that stress, I've learned to develop I don't drink, I don't do drugs, I don't smoke, I eat healthy, I drink lots of water. And it's not to say I want everybody to live like this. It's just questioning that relationship with yourself. And I work out, I lift weights, and I do yoga, and I stay active. But the stress when it comes to these types of topics, or being Indigenous female in Canada, it's like I get treated bad 80% of where you go. So it's like always like this. But it's going to take time. So in the theory of addictions, the idea of contemplating an idea of wanting change, and the idea, just having the breath of idea, is just the beginning. So when you start to breathe in the idea, you want to research that idea. You want to research ways. And when you do want to change yourself and challenge yourself to have more learning to create change that is more positive, you will learn, and you'll go to a library, you'll look up Facebook Reels, you'll look up YouTube videos on how to learn a behavior or concept or theory. And sometimes when you're doing those ideas and those discussions and the research, and you put it into practice, it is very fatiguing and very stressful. That's why they say healing takes 4 to 7 years to actually to solidify and to actually make effect. So in the beginning, when a person is in addiction and they want to create change, it is so hard, because you're challenging not only your body, but your brain to actually process the information. And cognitive therapy and cognitive thinking isn't something you just learn overnight. So that's why it's very frustrating to say, like, like when you say change your vocabulary, like you say, like, I don't want to say I know anymore. Like, if you stop saying like something, your brain can't process it right away. So that's one of the things that I wanted to bring forward. And as an Indigenous person, those certain elements and the toxic belittling behavior, the insults, and having to share space with people who are very passive aggressive, micromanaging, gaslighting, and it's very, and then people are very well intentioned. They have a lot of hope and want to be an ally. They want to be an ally so much. And sitting there and saying to them, like, one person, when I was talking to them and I was really glad my life is going, and then I was telling them about this one awesome thing that's happening, and they were like, good for you. And I'm like, do you realize that saying good for you is actually detrimental to my well-being? And they're like, how so? You are saying it in a way that is well-intending but condescending, because I am 43 years old. I'm your age or probably older. And you're talking to me like I'm grade 1. Saying good for you, like, good for you. Like, I was telling them, challenging themselves to say, that's awesome. And that is a more equal mind frame of how to approach, how to giving. Like, I had to work on socialization, because intergenerational trauma and stress can integrate your brain to a way where you get overwhelmed, stimulated. So your brain is over processed and you're dealing with all the stress. So I had to learn how to reconnect with people and smile. I had to learn how to have actual, like, discussions with people and friendly banter, because sometimes the things that I say may not be appropriate in another context. In my own personal world, I cannot joke about something that I think is funny and then bring it to the actual modern world and professional world, and they would understand it. So I had to really define myself, and I learned that I could not call someone like, this was a learning lab for me, because I grew up being told, you know, this white person. And I was like, someone was really offended, and I was like, well, okay, I'm gonna learn how to do the better. So I learned to say people of European descendants, or people of you know, of European background, because I didn't know what to say, and I was like, okay, Caucasian. But it's like learning those preferences and taking time in a way. And being Indigenous, I started to see I really liked my ability to blend in the background and see, because I was seeing this negative communication, and I actually utilize that as a set skill. So that way, because right now, everywhere is becoming more diversive, more inclusive. So if you could figure out a way how to speak and research ways how to work with people who are negative and in the workplace, and you still have that self-respect and that presence, you can actually utilize that as a set skill to diversify and talk eloquently and respectfully to help integrate populations. And because this is a new generation and the shift where you have all different diverse backgrounds and different what they say labels, but it's not labels per se, it's lifestyle choices, you can actually utilize that for your benefit professionally. And that's why I wanted to talk about this, about a discussion, because in the beginning, when you talk about it, the long-term mental and physical fatigue with higher degrees of burnout and having to directly implement and influence shared space, your body automatically responds with a toughness. And I don't want to have to influence younger generations or people to harbor that fear, when in truth, with love and with nourishment, saying you can actually utilize that as a set skill for yourself to taking up spaces, and learning how to say it in a respectfully way and an eloquent way is a lot more beneficial to your mental health and your physical health. And a lot of times when I take up space and I say something to someone, I literally feel my whole body shift, and I walk away from there feeling that weight come off, and I feel like empowered, like I created change. Nobody sees it. I don't go around like, saying, oh, I did this and do that, because I am part of advisory council member and to Alberta Health Services under the SOGI. It's the sexual diversity team here in Alberta. And I am Indigenous and I'm two-spirited, but I don't go around telling people that, for me, because Indigenous people, like where I grew up, we are humble. I want to maintain that humility, even if I was to have success, even if I was to do good, because I've seen growing up in a male dominated world, seeing that passive aggressive behavior actually creates a system where we don't have team building skills. And with the pandemic, I started to see how bad it was with just being an individual by yourself, when the world is actually falling apart and dying. So we need to work together as a collectively, and you are not the only person in the room and in this world. So if we work together, we're going to actually have more harmony. So that's the part that I wanted to talk about. It is a really highly controversial discussion, but I wanted to elevate your critical thinking skills in a way that you will become the ability to foster more inclusive, more safe space for not only just in workplaces, but in all institutions and in your world. And it just shifts the brain, because right now, I created that little light bulb in your soul and your light, and I wanted to like say it in a good way, in a very relaxed way. this is in my space, because I knew it would be a lot in the beginning, because your body stores on that fear and that fatigue. And for a long time, we have been going in a very awkward, negative, and it was sustainable, but it's actually causing younger generations to have higher degrees of burnout and higher degrees of mental health fatigue and high risk living conditions. And because it I can't imagine what it must be like to be someone younger in this day and age, when you like when you think in your mind, what future do we have if the world is actually falling apart? Like, there's forest fires, the air quality is bad, and you can't even eat that much animals now. You have to be vegetarian, and the water. So it's like aftermath of the pandemic, but I want to stress the fact that it is not impossible. It's just our brains have the capacity to see things at a very one dimension. And right now, we're having so much technology burnout and overstimulation that we actually don't even think about. Remember when you were a kid and you believed in, well, this is me. I believed in little people and Bigfoot and mermaids and watching I Like Little Mermaid, and having that ability to like process the fact that magic exists and faith and just incredible things that happen when we really believe. And I'm only saying this because when I was 4 years old, I had a really hard time. My parents were not the greatest parents sometimes. And one day I ran away into the bush, and I was 4, and I ran. And I remember sitting there crying, and I was like 4, right? And I remember seeing these little people, and they came out of this like dark void. And I know you're gonna think I'm crazy, but I was 4, and it really instilled me because it's part of our mythology, Indigenous people. And they were like, "Why are you crying?" And I looked at them and I said, "Who do you work for? I mean, do you work for the creator?" And they started laughing. And then I'm like, and I think about it, I'm like, it's so silly. But this is me talking about my reality. And I remember saying, "Do you work for a creator?" And they started laughing. And they said, "Who taught you that?" And I said, "My gookum." And then they're like, "Your gookum is really, really smart." Gookum means my grandmother in that's in Cree, right? My gookum was a sweat lodge and a pipe holder. So I remember just sitting there saying that to them, and they started laughing. And they said, "Why are you crying?" And I told them, I said, "Life is really hard. I'm really young and I'm going through a hard time. My parents are not there and I'm really fatigued, and this isn't life, I should be happy playing instead of having to survive all these horrible things." And then they said, you can come with us." And I was like, "What?" I'm like, "Where?" And they're like, "We have a different world. You can come with us. We'll take care of you. We'll be really blessed if you come with us." And I was like, "Will I come back again? Will I see my family?" And they said, "No, our time is different than your time. If you leave in 5 minutes, you'll come back in like centuries. So, or like 3,000 years." And I said, "So if I leave and I come back, your mom will already be dead, and all your family." And I was like thinking about it. And I said, "I don't think I want to leave this life. I think I want to enjoy life with my family." And they said, "Okay, well, we'll sit with you until the sun goes down and then you go home." And I said, "Okay." So we just sat there and they just like played with me. And I remember like seeing under this canopy of the sun. And then they're like, "Okay, it's time for you to go home." And then I went home, and they said, "When you go, your dad will be home. The moment you get home, your dad will got back." And I said, okay. So I went home and my dad was there and I was happy. And I always thought of that. And my gukum used to tell me stories. Like, I remember we're sitting at a sweat lodge and I was real little, like probably like 8. And she's like, you know what? And I was like, what? Like I knew she was telling me it's like something really sacred, right? So she's kind of moving in and I was like, little what? And it's just like, I saw a mermaid once. It's like, what? Grandma, go, you're lying. You're lying. And I was just laughing at her, right? And she's like, no, it's real. She said in the modern world, they have stories. They're called mythology. She said the thing is, when modern people get to a certain age, they forget about the magic of the world. And Europeans, they forgot it because they were so stuck on materialistic wealth and greed and that toxicity, that negativity got in their brain. So they lost that connection to Mother Earth. That's why they are so lost, building more cities, she said. And I was like, but it's only in books. She said, no, one time she was sitting there and we have this big lake where I'm from. And she sat up and she was singing this song at 5 a.m. And it's the mermaid song, right? So it goes, na pioma kagitwea, na pioma na weoma. And she is sang real loud, right? Because it's 5 a.m. and she's a sweat lodge pipe college holder. She passed away. She sang and she said she saw this mermaid come up and it waved at her. And I said, what did you do? She said, you don't do nothing. She said, if you ever see anything that comes to you, don't go to it. Don't say nothing. Don't do nothing. And I said, why? And this is what she always used to tell me. Because you don't know if a thing is good or bad. So just watch, stay there. Don't do nothing. And it was telling it to come to her. They were saying, come. And she just sat there and she said all she did was stand there and watch it. And then after a while, it went away. And I said, how come you didn't go? Because there are good mermaids and there are bad mermaids, and her people, her mom and them used to tell her that those things will come up and pretend to be good and they'll take them under. And you don't know what happens. So I was like, that was my gukum. And in our culture, in our way of life, we have mythology. We have ways that have been almost destroyed. Even most the people who are the holders, the family, the spiritual leaders, those ones are the ones who were actually watched out for. And we had to hide our ways and our family lines because they were going to destroy us. And the ones who were spiritual leaders and families and their children, those children in the residential schools were put through so much abuse, harsh abuse, because that was a warfare tactic. If you destroy their spirituality through the children, you don't have continuation. So now, after everything, it is hard to be Indigenous, to be a minority. But what is harder is sitting there doing nothing and pretending like it's okay and letting it go, which is why I wanted the discussion to talk about this. And when we have these discussions and to normalize it, I always have water. I have smudge. And when I talk about these things, I normalize having water after having it. And I want to remember that your body gets tired. So take your hands and just rub them and then brush off all that energy. And you're going to feel it on the back of your neck. So like brush that off, and then on your shoulders. and on your chest and on your neck and the back of your shoulder blades, and just like brush it off and like let it go. And I'm not saying everything is going to 100% be let go and you're going to feel like you want to fix things because it's tiresome. You want it to end. But for part of self-care is also saying you can't fix everything. And I should know. My mom was a residential school survivor since the age of 3. I grew up with parents who were residential school survivors who were not very safe. My mom was an addict. I grew up in Edmonton and in the reserve on the land of my Gookum. My Gookum saved me. When I got older, it was harder for me because I was also in foster care. So it was 10 times more harder than other people. And I went to foster care and then I was divorced. Then I worked real hard. Then I lost everything because I was medicating myself by drinking. So I lost everything. And then I had to work again for it. And then when I was in school in post-secondary, and then I graduated, my brother died from an overdose. Then my mother died from an overdose. Then my younger sister died of COVID. And she had so much stress. She wouldn't talk about her trauma or anything. So it got into her body. And she had a lot of health complications because remember I said the hypervigilant mode, the high cortisone, it actually causes a lot of health complications. So she had diabetes. She died and she didn't wake up in 2023 from COVID. And then a couple months later, my sister-in-law was murdered. So this year, I just spent a year and I spent a lot of time healing, but also I was diagnosed and I had to get a hysterectomy by myself with 2 kids. So I had to spend time. My doctor didn't want me working. He wanted me to focus on myself, and I was really overwhelmed because I did all this alone by myself. And I don't say it to say pity, it's a reality that residential schools make it so that you don't all have that community, that nuclear support, and you literally survive a war. But the best part is I have a really blessed life. My Gookum showed me these old ways. I'm a traditional artist. So all of my house I have, this is a whole hula hoop, it's a dream catcher. I have things all in my house to help me. I have how many pairs of moccasins, and this isn't me boasting. This is me saying I did the research to help me to heal. So I had 3 art grants and it gave me a chance to do research of not only colonization, but history and the traditional arts to help give me a foundation and realizing how hard it was for our people and our old ways are dying. But I also know how to live off the land and I'm grateful for that. But I don't share my story for pity or for you to be traumatized or be triggered, but it's to uplift you because there are harder things in life. Whatever you go through, everybody goes through pain. And it doesn't mean that any other person's pain is more powerful than the other person's pain. It means sometimes Creator makes a person go through a hard time in life, not because he doesn't love you, because sometimes some people are made to like break generational curses or intergenerational trauma. And it's not easy, it's a lonely path, but it's also very worthwhile. So whenever I have a hard time, I think of my siblings and how they're sitting with the Creator, with the old ways and the ancestors, and they're having ceremonies. And I think about them and I say, I'll stay. And I really want to go home and be a real old lady. Like that movie, The Titanic, if you ever watched this. She's real old. And she has like all these pictures of everything she's accomplished. And then ever since my hysterectomy surgery, I have a bucket list. And I think of all the things I want to accomplish because I never thought I would actually see to 43. I thought I would die before I was 30 because of how fast life was and how everybody around me was dying. And I can't do anything but take care of myself now. Eat healthy food and work out and stuff, and then do everything I can every day. But that is what I wanted to share with you in a discussion, because traditionally Indigenous people, this practice of storytelling was a more beneficial way for learning, because your brain can process in a way that is more nurturing and calm. So that way you can articulate and conceptualize the theories that I was talking about in your own way. And that's the importance of being Indigenous, is understanding your learning is more kinesthetics, which is you learn through movement. And there are different learning styles, but more so kinesthetics is more beneficial for your body, especially with the stress that's going on right now. I just take a deep breath, because that was a really big discussion. And we are going to decompress for a couple of seconds just to give some time. That was a lot. I'm really nervous because sharing, and it's just to help you familiarize, because my hardships and my teachings and what I'm showing you today, these things are for you to benefit, because I'm tired. I've gone through a hard life. But you're younger than me, and you have the benefit of your youth in your body. So the things that I'm sharing from you, what I learned in social work and cognitive therapy and these little things that I've went through, I'm hoping, oh yeah, the benefit of subjective and objective writing. When you're going to diversify and you're going to create safe spaces, always keep in mind that the person next to you you're working with, it's not that they're your enemy, but you always need to have evidential support. And whatever you do, keep in mind of if there is an automatic negative experience, always write down the date, the time, what happened, and what you did. But do not utilize your feelings. Do not talk about how you feel, because you'll be looked down as incompetent because of your feelings in any subject matter. Only keep it to details. And when you submit it, you're only doing it in a way, don't be aggressive. Do it in a way where you want to create harmony and say, this happened. Can we use this as a learning opportunity? Because everything is negative is not negative. It could be a learning opportunity. Because you have to keep in mind that having evidential support in a very respectful way is beneficial to you. Okay, so that's good. Do we have any questions? It's 2:11. I think we have enough time. I hopefully that you got to sit and relax and enjoy yourself. That was the whole point of the discussion. But yeah.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat or put on your mic and ask. We do have some time left, so if there is any questions or anything else that you would like Michelle to talk about, if she feels like she wants to, then you can also drop that in the chat as well.
Oh, I'm just gonna light some smudge because that was heavy. But also positive. Like this morning, Okay, this is me being silly, but this I like listening to iHeartRadio, and I love listening to this hip hop radio station called it's in California, and I listen to this every morning because I love hip hop. It's called Real 92.1, and it's LA, home of hip hop. And I was like so nervous for this morning, but I do this all the time. And I was twerking because I learned this a couple days ago. Twerking actually releases the stress that is in your hips and in your legs. So, and that is it is like a eternal, it's a stress that can actually stay stagnant. And you'll see people who get older and they get it in their back and their legs. They're like, oh, my back hurts and my legs hurt. And then I'm like, I don't want that. So I learned that when you when you twerk or you dance, you actually release that stress in your body that gets in there. So I was doing that this morning, and I was like weightlifting and just I feel really silly for saying that, but that's the things that I like to do. And then before we had this, yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Michelle. I think it's actually good and important to recognize the things that we do to release stress, especially when we have difficult conversations like this. So if anyone else has anything that they do before or after a difficult conversation, you can also drop that in the chat. Feel free. I know for me, I love to listen to music. I'm not a big hip hop person, but I do appreciate other music. So that's something I do when I've had a difficult conversation or when I'm about to. I think it really helps to relax the body and the mind.
I just realized that I do realize that what I said could be, I don't have the emotional cues that some people do. So when they cry, I don't know how to respond because I kind of get numb, and that's normal. But if there are any kind of tears or anything like that, it doesn't mean that I don't incorporate it or acknowledge it. It means that it's been so deeply embedded me to detach. And then I have to really sit there and feel. But it's only because that's been conditioned in me. So I do feel like crying. I know that it might be heavy to hear this, and it is sad because it kind of resonates in everybody to have that taken from us. And having tears isn't a bad thing. And sitting there and being vulnerable isn't a bad thing. Because a lot of people were told me, like, I remember saying, don't cry, be strong. But when you be strong, you actually internalize that feature to a point where your body starts to wear down. And not crying is so bad for our bodies. Like, and I'm not just saying that because it's said over and over again. I'm saying that because I never cried after losing so much for over a year because I kept saying, I'll cry later, I'll cry later, I'll cry later. And I actually got really physically sick last month, beginning of the month actually, because I couldn't keep doing it. My body was like, you have to like purge and cry. So I got really sick, and now I make effort to cry. But it's because our society labels feelings as not equivalent to productivity. But also now we're starting to normalize having to take up mental health breaks. So sometimes when it is heavy, I just walk away for like, I just have to, I'll say like, I have to go for a break. I have to go get some water. I have to go to the washroom. And I will sit there and I'll let those feelings process, because being a robot is not good. I mean, that's how I survived. I learned that with my mentor, who is an amazing mental health therapist, but she's actually the one who's encouraging me to like keep getting my education, because when I have sessions with her, I'm like a light bulb. I remember things and articulate it, but it is hard. Like right now, I can feel the energy and the sadness and everything, but I'm really grateful to like still be here and to like talk with you and to share these parts of me. Um, because it's I have faith that you are the younger generation that is going to open doorways that were harder for me. That you'll have lesser fatigue, mental health strain than I ever did. And all that things that I went through and that suffering opened doorways for you and helped you to become this wonderful, successful, in your idea of success, person who doesn't internalize that pain because you deserve to feel joy. And I deserve to feel joy after all this hardship. And I know that. I just want to like see a future of the younger generation not so weighed down by conservative, stern people who say they know better. Because you guys are like coming up with these amazing ideas and you think out of the box and you guys are so smart and you're thriving in certain elements because of you're scared the world is dying. And I know that sounds harsh, but those stressful elements actually bring out the genius in each of you. And you have your own set skills and your own leadership. So you'll flourish in your own environment because healthy stress will actually want you to think ingenious methods of how you want to change the world, if that helps. But I just wanted to say that because it was a really heavy topic, and talking about those things are not easy. And that's what I do. And it is fatiguing for me sometimes. So I try to find fun wherever I go. But I literally being advisory council and like helping and being a consultant is really hard because you have to ask these questions. You have to like sit in these spaces and I feel burnt out and I feel overwhelmed. And then I'm starting university again in the fall and I'm like, can I do this? And I'm like, yes, I can, because it's in that's why I called in the ancestors, the creators, because it's in you. It's just like this magical doorway that's opening up and you know it's in you and those ancestors are there and you could feel it. And I want to be the benefit that you leave from this situation, as opposed to thinking about how hard it is for everyone in the world right now, or to be Indigenous. And I want you to leave thinking like that. I want you to think that, there's magic in there in you, and those special little gifts that are inside you, those like, how do they, ancestral gifts, your spirit guides, your ancestors, your, traditional Indigenous knowledge is just there, and it's always been there for you. And you have those abilities, you come from like strong people, strong spiritual people who go in the bush and feel their way out. They use their gifts to find their way out. We spent thousands and thousands of years on the land with no doctors, no hospitals, women giving birth without any anesthetic, without a hospital, without a doctor. We have people who know how to hunt, find food, and find animals, who literally get out of their bodies and search. Their spirit can go walking how far away. Those are the things that I want you to leave with, is thinking of the fact that that's in your blood. And it's not just Indigenous thing, it's a human thing. Is to have that connection with the creator and Mother Earth is the best part for us right now. So that's the thing that I want you to leave, is thinking of that.
Thank you so much for that, Michelle. Actually, sorry to interrupt, but we do have a question in the chat if you can access that.
Yeah. How do you suggest navigating spaces where you're tokenized, granted, or taken for deal with imposter syndrome? And there are moments where we felt solidarity and groups where we experienced colonization. Oh, okay. So this is a great thing. So sitting there and speaking in a group where it's safe, or you have these discussions, this is happening in my workplace and everything. sometimes talking about it to someone else or in a group setting is the benefit for you because you're articulating it. You know what's happening. So what you can do is start writing down these situations when they happen and then submitting them to a person who's a superior, the administrator, teacher, principal. I went to the rec center here and I talked to the supervisor and I told them about this is happening. I was being a token in native. They were getting my information, gathering it and utilizing it for me. And I was feeling it was not really good for my mental health. And I was tired of teaching people and I'm not getting paid for it. And I'm like, why am I having to put up these spaces? Like, I'm not here to educate people. And saying it, and they're like, well, what can you do about it? Well, for one thing, like I actually created an opportunity for myself where the recreation center wanted to create a practicum for me for diversity inclusive training for opportunities in the future. Utilize that. That's your stepping stone. That's your professional, like it's not an obligation, but that is your superstar skills of you being and creating a more inclusive environment. So every time this happens, write it down. And it's not for you to be a snitch. I know that you, because everybody's all like, I don't want to be a snitch. No, don't say the person's name, which if you want to, you could, but you were giving examples. You don't have to talk about who it is, but give examples of when it happened and when it keeps happening. And then finally you get to a point where you're like, this is not good for our mental health. And whatever province you are in, there is occupational safety and health and regulations for workplace safety, like workplace helmets. That is not mentally safe. That is it. You shouldn't have to go through it. So go to the occupational health and say, hey man, I'm burnt out. This is happening. I talked to my superior. They're not doing anything about it. I'm tired of being a token Indian. They're going to me. I'm not paid for that. And ask them, if you want me to give information as an Indigenous person and I'm teaching you, at least give me honorarium. Give me professional credit for this. I want this on my resume. Give me tobacco and give me cloth for sharing my knowledge. Give me an extra amount for this, for doing this extra work for your workplace to be safer. And that's what I did. I'd be like, you know what? Give me honorarium. Give me tobacco. Give me cloth. Give me an extra amount of money because I'm teaching you guys and you guys are taking all this and I'm burnt out. And you're doing all this work. You're getting paid extra work for something and then you're taking it home with you. So that's why I just try to say it in a way where it's like, why am I doing this work for you? And it might not work in your favor sometimes, but try not to see it as a negative. Try to see it as even you saying it is like every time you say it, you go and say like, hey, this is happening. They may not like it 100%, and they might actually get their feathers ruffled, and they might be all like, well, we're doing everything the best they can, right? Like, but it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It means you're trying to find a space that is going to work with you. So if this company isn't going to work with you, maybe there's another company is going to, but it doesn't mean I want you to quit or anything. It just means that when you first start applying these skills, it's not going to always work 100%. But then you're going to end up feeling defeat. But then the one time where you actually meet someone who wants you to talk, who wants to listen, it's going to make so much sense. And it's going to make you feel way better that you're going to end up disregarding all those times you sat there feeling stressed out, if that helps.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for that. And we are getting close to the end. So I just wanted to ask if you could leave us with one or two more sentences that just sum up your panel, sum up the message that you're trying to get across. And then we are at the end. So I will leave you with that.
So there's this book. It's called Killing the Wheatigu by Suzanne Method. I will put it in the chat. I've been reading this. This has been helping, but also start to learn outside the box. Start to think of different start to research communication styles, how to work with people who are difficult, how to work with narcissistic people, how to be team building. start learning team building exercises. You're in it to work as a team. No one is above. Like there has to be this thing where you got to stop talking about another person. You got to stop being negative. You got to stop looking at another person like you're better than them. You got to start thinking of how can I work with this person, because you can't like everybody 100% all the time. That's not the reality of the world, and dynamics and grouping is normal. Storming is normal. So I do the research and I go to the library. I even go on Facebook, because TikTok and Facebook reels are really quick ways for you to actually micro learning that is not so evasive and so heavy like a huge book. So I go and do the research on how to like communicate with people, how to deal with microaggression, how to deal with gaslighting. That's a really good one. How to deal with people who are well-intentioned. And also I did a lot of research in websites on how to deal with microaggression and racial tension in the workplace. And people are well-intended, but it doesn't mean that a person cannot be super rude and say something to you in your face that is really rude and really bad. So I do the reading and I do the research, and that's the one thing that I can say for you, and try to figure out team building skills, how to work as a team member, initiate, be a leader, take effort to be like, hey, let's do this icebreaker and make it fun, play, have fun. And that's what I can say leaving from this. And I hope that it really helps you to benefit from all of this stuff that's going on. Yeah.
That was awesome. Thank you again, Michelle, so much for being a part of this panel and for sharing so much of your story and wisdom with us. This is an important topic to talk about, and we all really appreciate you coming here. And with that, we have reached the end of day one of the Reimagining the Future conference. I would like to thank all of our event facilitators, the mobilizers, the advisors, and everyone who came today for making today's events happen. And thank you to the audience as well for engaging with us. Tomorrow, we'll be meeting again at 9 a.m. for opening remarks from our special guest, Amna, who participated in last year's Remobilizing Youth program, and she pitched her project, the Meal Helper Heroes, at last year's conference. That will be followed by a workshop focused on climate anxiety and storytelling from Alicia Richens, mobilizer presentations, a talk from Sarah Syed, and a final panel held by Reimagine 17 that will discuss how we can re-envision sustainable cities. So I hope everyone has a great rest of their day, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of you back here tomorrow. Bye, everyone.